Captain Jake Morrison stood at the bridge window of the UES Thunderbolt and watched the alien ships dance around his vessel like angry hornets. The silver ships moved so fast they looked like streaks of light against the black space. His own ship sat still and heavy like a rock in the middle of their formation. The aliens had been circling for 3 hours now, and Jake could feel his crew getting nervous. Commander Lisa Hayes walked up beside him and shook her head. She had been monitoring the alien communications, and the news was not good. The Zephyrian Fleet Commander, Admiral Zixthak, was making fun of them on every frequency he could find. His ships were faster than anything humans had ever built, and he wanted everyone to know it. "Sir, they are calling us names again," said Communications Officer Danny Wright from his station. The young man looked angry and embarrassed. Danny had served on human ships for 5 years, but he had never seen aliens treat them with such open disrespect. The Zephyrians were broadcasting their insults across the entire star system, so that anyone listening would hear how weak human ships were. Jake looked at his ship's status display and sighed. The Thunderbolt was indeed slower than the alien vessels. Where their ships could reach incredible speeds that bent space around them, his ship could barely manage a third of that velocity. The hull was thick and square, built for strength rather than beauty. To alien eyes, it probably looked like a flying metal box with engines stuck on the back. The Zephyrians had arrived at the Kepler 442 system 3 days ago with 16 of their finest warships. Each one was a work of art with curves that seemed to flow like water and hulls that gleamed like mirrors. They moved through space, as if they were swimming through air, and their weapons could strike targets from distances that seemed impossible. Admiral Zixthak had made his intentions clear from the moment he arrived. The humans had colonized this system without permission from the Zephyrian Empire, and now they would pay the price. The alien commander spoke perfect English, and he used it to deliver insults that cut deep into human pride. "Your ships are slow and ugly like the creatures who built them," came his voice over the speakers. "We have ruled space for 10,000 years while you have barely learned to leave your homeworld. Today you will learn why primitive species should stay where they belong." Chief Petty Officer Amy Collins looked up from her sensor station with disgust written across her face. She had served in Earth's Navy before joining the Space Fleet, and she knew what real military discipline looked like. The aliens were showing off like school bullies instead of conducting themselves like professional warriors. "Sir, they are maintaining distance at exactly 50,000 kilometers, she reported. "That puts them just outside our effective weapons range, but well within theirs. They know exactly what they are doing." Jake nodded and walked back to his command chair. The aliens were following their standard battle doctrine, which their intelligence files had described in detail. Stay far away from the enemy. Use superior speed to avoid return fire and slowly destroy the target from a safe distance. It was a proven strategy that had conquered dozens of worlds across the galaxy. Lieutenant Steve Parker called out from the engineering station where he was monitoring the ship's power systems. "Captain, all our special modifications are running perfectly. The reactor is stable and we have full power to all systems, including the ones they don't know about." "Good," Jake replied quietly. "Make sure everything stays that way. We are going to need every advantage we can get when the time comes." The Thunderbolt had been built in the orbital shipyards above Mars, using the best technology humanity possessed. But what the aliens did not know was that this ship was also a test bed for experimental systems that had been classified at the highest levels. The thick hull and slow engines were not signs of primitive engineering, but rather carefully designed features that hid the ship's true capabilities. "Danny." Wright shook his head as another wave of insults came through the communication system. "Sir, they are now calling us the turtle ship. They say we are too slow to run away and too weak to fight back." "Let them talk," Jake said with a slight smile. "Words never sank a ship." Commander Hayes studied the tactical display that showed the positions of all 16 alien vessels. They had formed a perfect sphere around the human ship, with each vessel positioned to provide overlapping fields of fire. It was textbook formation flying that would have impressed military academies back on Earth. "They are being very careful," she observed. "No ship is closer than 50 kilometers, and they are all moving in synchronized patterns. Their commander knows his business." Amy Collins had been tracking the alien movements for hours, and she had noticed something interesting. "Captain, they are following their tactical manual exactly. Every maneuver matches the patterns our intelligence services captured from previous battles. They are predictable." Jake had studied those same intelligence reports, and he knew that predictability could be turned into a weakness if you were patient enough to wait for the right moment. The aliens thought they had humans, figured out based on what they had seen so far, but they were about to learn that appearances could be very deceiving. The Zephyrian ships continued their taunting dance around the human vessel, while their commander broadcast more insults. He spoke of how human colonies would be enslaved and how Earth itself would bow before Zephyrian might. His arrogance filled the communication channels like poison, spreading through water. But Jake Morrison had learned patience from his father, who had served on nuclear submarines during the old wars on Earth. In the deep ocean, as in deep space, the hunter who struck first often lost to the one who waited for the perfect moment. The aliens could mock his ship all they wanted, but they would soon discover that humans had their own ideas about how space battles should be fought. "Sir," said Steve Parker from engineering, "all systems show green across the board. We are ready for whatever comes next." Jake looked at his crew and felt proud of how calm they remained under pressure. These men and women had volunteered to serve on humanity's most advanced warship, even though they knew they might face enemies with superior technology. They trusted their training, their equipment, and their captain to see them through. "Steady as she goes," Jake ordered. "Let them come to us." Admiral Zixthak felt very pleased with himself as he watched the human ship sit motionless in the center of his formation. From his command chair aboard the flagship Stellar Wind, he could see every detail of the primitive vessel through his advanced sensors. The human ship looked exactly like what his intelligence reports had described: a crude metal box with weapons bolted onto the sides and engines that belonged in a museum. "Begin the encirclement." "Protocol," he ordered his tactical officer. "I want a perfect sphere formation with all ships maintaining exactly 50,000 kilometers distance. We will show these primitives how real naval warfare is conducted." The Zephyrian fleet moved with the precision of a ballet troupe, as 16 silver ships took their assigned positions around the human vessel. Each ship was a masterpiece of engineering, with hulls made from materials that could bend light around them, and engines that could fold space itself. They had been built in shipyards that orbited ancient stars when humans were still discovering fire. The admiral studied the tactical display with satisfaction. His ships formed a perfect three-dimensional net around the enemy, with overlapping fields of fire that would prevent any escape. The humans would be destroyed slowly and methodically, while the rest of the galaxy watched and learned what happened to species that dared challenge Zephyrian authority. "Sir, our sensors show the human weapon systems are standard plasma cannons and missile tubes," reported his science officer. "Their defensive shields appear adequate, but nothing exceptional. We estimate their maximum effective weapons range at approximately 30,000 kilometers." Zixthak nodded approvingly. The humans had built their ship for close-range combat, which was exactly what he had expected from such a young and inexperienced species. They probably thought battles were won by charging straight at the enemy and trading shots until one side broke. Such primitive thinking would be their downfall. "Commence firing pattern Alpha," he commanded. "All ships will engage at maximum range using rotating bombardment sequences. I want continuous fire on target, but no ship should remain stationary for more than 30 seconds. The Zephyrian ships began their attack with deadly grace. They swept in toward the human vessel, fired their weapons, and then accelerated away before return fire could reach them. Their plasma beams struck the enemy shields in brilliant flashes of energy, while their commanders reported successful hits with professional satisfaction. Aboard the Thunderbolt, Chief Petty Officer Amy Collins watched the enemy attack pattern with the cold calculation of someone who had studied naval warfare for 20 years. The aliens were executing a classic long-range bombardment, using their superior speed to stay outside effective return fire range. It was sound tactics that would eventually wear down any conventional opponent. "Captain, they are following textbook procedure," she reported to Jake Morrison. 16 ships in rotating attack pattern, maintaining maximum distance while concentrating fire on our position. They are trying to overwhelm our shields through sustained bombardment. Jake nodded as he felt the ship shudder under another wave of enemy fire. The Thunderbolt's defensive systems were holding, but he could see the power readings fluctuating as the shields absorbed hit after hit. To anyone watching, it would appear that the human ship was trapped and slowly being destroyed. Commander Lisa Hayes monitored the weapon systems while mentally calculating firing solutions for targets that remained stubbornly outside their range. "Sir, their formation is tight, but they are staying well beyond our conventional weapons. We cannot return effective fire at this distance." "That is exactly what they expect," Jake replied calmly. Let them think they have us figured out. Lieutenant Steve Parker called out updates from the engineering section where he was carefully managing the ship's power distribution. Most of the reactor output was going to maintain the shields against the alien bombardment, but he was also feeding power to systems that did not appear on any standard schematic. Captain, the special modifications are ready for activation, he reported quietly. All quantum field generators are online and the displacement torpedo tubes are loaded with full warheads. We can engage the system at any time. Not yet, Steve, Jake said firmly. We need them to commit fully to their attack pattern first. Patience is our greatest weapon right now. The alien bombardment continued for another hour with the Zephyrian ships dancing around their target, like predators circling wounded prey. Admiral Zixthak watched with growing confidence as his sensors showed the human shields weakening under the sustained assault. Soon those primitive barriers would fail and the real destruction could begin. Sir, the enemy defensive grid shows clear signs of degradation, his tactical officer reported with satisfaction. At current bombardment rates, we estimate shield failure in approximately 40 minutes. The human ship will be helpless once their barriers collapse. Zixthak permitted himself a moment of triumph as he considered how this victory would enhance his reputation throughout the galaxy. The humans had been expanding into space with disturbing confidence for the past few decades, and someone needed to teach them their place in the cosmic order. Today that lesson would be delivered with overwhelming force. What the Admiral could not see was the subtle preparation taking place aboard the human vessel. Amy Collins had begun rerouting power from non-essential systems to feed the exotic machinery hidden deep within the ship's hull. Steve Parker made final adjustments to equipment that had cost humanity 3 years of intensive research and development to perfect. The Thunderbolt had never been intended as just another warship despite what its appearance suggested. It was the prototype for an entirely new class of vessel designed to test technologies that could revolutionize space warfare. The thick hull that looked so primitive actually contained quantum field generators powerful enough to bend reality itself. Danny Wright continued monitoring alien communications and noted that the Zephyrian crews were becoming more relaxed as the battle progressed, according to their expectations. They were beginning to celebrate victory before it was actually achieved, which was always a dangerous mistake in combat, sir. They are discussing how to divide up our colonies after they destroy us, he reported with disgust. They seem very confident that we cannot threaten them. Confidence can be a weakness, Jake observed as he watched the tactical display, especially when it is based on incomplete information. Commander Hayes studied the enemy formation with growing anticipation. All 16 Zephyrian ships were now fully committed to their attack pattern with every vessel participating in the bombardment sequence. They had positioned themselves exactly where human battle planners had hoped they would be. Captain, all enemy vessels are maintaining formation at optimal range, she reported. They are completely focused on their bombardment pattern and showing no signs of defensive awareness. Jake smiled grimly as he realized the moment was almost at hand. The aliens thought they were watching a conventional space battle, but they were about to discover that humans had their own ideas about how such encounters should unfold. Prepare for quantum displacement activation, he ordered quietly. It is time to show our guests some genuine human hospitality. The battle had been raging for over 2 hours when Admiral Zixthak finally allowed himself to believe that victory was assured. His 16 ships continued their deadly dance around the human vessel, while their weapons pounded the enemy's shields with relentless precision. The primitive ship sat in the center of his formation like a wounded animal waiting for the final blow. Sir, the human defensive barriers are showing critical fluctuations, reported his tactical officer with barely contained excitement. Shield collapse is imminent. We estimate no more than 15 minutes before total failure. Zixthak nodded with satisfaction as he watched the energy readings from the enemy ship decline steadily under his bombardment. The humans had put up a better fight than he had expected, but the outcome had never been in doubt. Superior technology and tactics always prevailed over primitive determination. Prepare boarding parties, he ordered. I want prisoners to interrogate about human military capabilities. The location of their home world and colonies will be useful intelligence for our future expansion plans. What the Admiral did not realize was that the apparent weakness of the human ship was carefully orchestrated theater, designed to lure his forces into the perfect position. Captain Jake Morrison watched the tactical display with the patience of a hunter who had finally maneuvered his prey exactly where he wanted them. "Lisa, how many enemy ships are maintaining close formation?" he asked his tactical officer quietly. Commander Lisa Hayes checked her sensors and smiled with grim satisfaction. "All 16 vessels, sir. They are holding position at exactly 50,000 kilometers in a perfect sphere around us. They have committed their entire force to the bombardment." Jake nodded approvingly. The aliens were following their tactical doctrine with textbook precision, which meant they were completely predictable. Every ship was positioned exactly where human war planners had hoped they would be when the moment came to spring their trap. Chief Petty Officer Amy Collins had been monitoring the enemy communications, while secretly preparing systems that existed nowhere in standard fleet manuals. The Zephyrians were becoming overconfident as they watched human shields weaken, and they were already discussing how to divide the spoils of victory. "Captain, they are arguing about which colonies to attack first after they finish with us," she reported. "They seem to think this battle is already over." "Overconfidence has destroyed more fleets than enemy fire," Jake observed as he activated his command console. "Steve, are our special systems ready for activation?" Lieutenant Steve Parker looked up from the engineering station where he had been making final adjustments to equipment that had taken humanity's best scientists 3 years to develop. Hidden. Throughout the ship's hull were quantum field generators capable of manipulating the fabric of space-time itself. "All quantum displacement systems are online and stable, Captain," he reported. "The field generators are charged to full capacity, and the displacement torpedoes are loaded with maximum yield warheads. We can engage at your command." Jake took a deep breath as he considered the magnitude of what he was about to unleash. The technology hidden aboard his ship represented a quantum leap in human military capability that would change the balance of power throughout the galaxy. But first, it had to be tested in actual combat against a real enemy. The concept was deceptively simple, even though the engineering required to make it work had pushed human science to its absolute limits. By manipulating quantum fields, the Thunderbolt could shift itself into a parallel dimension that existed alongside normal space. From within this quantum realm, the ship would be invisible to enemy sensors, while still being able to observe and target opponents in regular space. "Danny, cease all communications with the enemy," Jake ordered. "I want complete radio silence from this point forward." Communications Officer Danny Wright acknowledged the command and shut down all external transmissions. The sudden silence would seem strange to the aliens, but they would probably assume it meant the humans had finally accepted their fate. Amy Collins began the activation sequence for systems that officially did not exist according to any military records. Power flowed through conduits that had been disguised as standard ship infrastructure, while exotic matter began circulating through field generators hidden behind false bulkheads. "Quantum field is building, Captain," she reported as strange readings appeared on her instruments. "Field strength at 20% and climbing steadily." The air on the bridge began to shimmer slightly as reality itself started to bend around the human ship. The effect was subtle at first, but it grew stronger as more power flowed into the quantum manipulation systems. Space and time were being twisted into new configurations that defied everything most people thought they knew about physics. "Lisa." Hayes watched her tactical display with fascination as the readings became increasingly strange. "Captain, I am detecting spatial distortions forming around our hull. The quantum field is beginning to affect local space-time." Jake felt the ship vibrate with energies that seemed to come from dimensions beyond normal reality. This was the moment that would either prove human ingenuity could overcome alien arrogance or destroy his ship in a spectacular failure of untested technology. "Field strength at 50%, Amy reported as the shimmer in the air became more pronounced. "All generators are operating within normal parameters." Outside the ship, the Zephyrian bombardment continued as Admiral Zixthak watched the human shields flicker and weaken under his sustained attack. He was so focused on the approaching moment of victory that he failed to notice the subtle changes beginning to affect the space around his target. "Sir, the enemy ship appears to be experiencing some kind of system malfunction," his science officer reported with puzzlement. "We are detecting unusual energy signatures that do not match any known technology. Probably their primitive reactor failing under battle stress," Zixthak replied dismissively. Continue the bombardment until their shields collapse completely. Aboard the Thunderbolt, the quantum field generators reached full power as reality warped around the human vessel. Jake could feel the universe shifting as his ship prepared to move into a realm of existence that most species did not even know existed. Field strength at 100%, Captain, Amy announced. All systems are stable and ready for dimensional displacement. Jake looked around his bridge at the crew members who had volunteered to test technology that could revolutionize warfare or kill them all in the attempt. These men and women represented the best of humanity, courage, intelligence, and determination, combined with the willingness to risk everything for the future of their species. Execute quantum displacement, he commanded firmly. Show them what humans can do when we stop playing by their rules. The universe exploded into light and color as the Thunderbolt slipped sideways out of normal reality and into a dimension where the laws of physics bent to human will. Reality twisted and bent as the UES Thunderbolt slipped out of normal space and into a dimension that existed parallel to the physical universe. Captain Jake Morrison felt his stomach lurch as the quantum displacement field carried his ship into a realm where the rules of physics operated according to human design rather than natural law. The bridge lights flickered as exotic energies flowed through systems that had never been tested under combat conditions. Chief Petty Officer Amy Collins watched her instruments with fascination as readings appeared that defied everything she thought she knew about how space and time were supposed to work. Displacement complete, Captain, she reported with amazement in her voice. We are now operating in quantum space, approximately 0.7 meters displaced from our original dimensional coordinates. Jake looked through the bridge windows and saw a universe that seemed both familiar and completely alien. The stars were still visible, but they appeared to shimmer and dance with colors that had no names in human language. Space itself seemed to flow like liquid around his ship, while dimensions folded and unfolded in patterns that hurt to look at directly. What is our status relative to the enemy fleet? He asked. Commander Lisa Hayes, who was studying tactical displays that showed readings no human had ever seen before. Sir, we are invisible to their sensors while maintaining perfect observation capability, she replied with growing excitement. From our current position, we can see all 16 Zephyrian ships, but they cannot detect us at all. We have achieved complete tactical invisibility, Lieutenant Steve Parker called out from engineering, where he was monitoring the quantum field generators that kept them anchored in this strange realm between realities. Captain, all systems are operating within acceptable parameters. The displacement field is stable and we have sufficient power reserves for at least 6 hours of quantum space operation. Jake smiled grimly as he realized that 3 years of intensive research and development had finally paid off. Human scientists had discovered quantum space by accident while studying the theoretical limits of faster-than-light travel. Military engineers had spent months figuring out how to weaponize the phenomenon, and now it was time to test their theories in actual combat. Communications. Officer Danny Wright shook his head in wonder as he monitored the alien frequencies. Sir, the Zephyrians are completely confused. They are scanning empty space and demanding to know where we went. Admiral Zixthak is ordering his ships to search the entire star system. From within quantum space, the human crew could observe normal reality like looking through a one-way mirror. The alien ships were still maintaining their formation around the position where the Thunderbolt had been, but now they were firing their weapons at empty space while their sensors showed nothing but vacuum. They think we have some kind of cloaking device, Amy observed as she listened to the alien communications. They are trying every scanning frequency they know, but quantum displacement operates on principles their science has never discovered. Jake studied the tactical situation with the cold calculation of a predator that had finally maneuvered its prey into the perfect position. All 16 enemy ships were exactly where he wanted them, clustered together in a tight formation while searching frantically for a target they could not find. Lisa, what is our weapons status? He asked his tactical officer. All displacement. Torpedo tubes are loaded and ready, sir, she replied. We have 16 quantum warheads, each with a 50 megaton yield. The torpedoes can be launched directly into normal space from our current position. The displacement torpedoes were perhaps the most terrifying weapons humanity had ever created. Unlike conventional missiles that had to travel through space to reach their targets, the quantum warheads could be fired directly from the parallel dimension into normal reality. They would appear instantly next to enemy ships without any warning or opportunity for defensive countermeasures. Steve Parker checked his engineering displays and nodded with satisfaction. "Captain, the torpedo launch system is fully operational. We can fire all weapons simultaneously or in sequence as tactical conditions require." Jake considered his options as he watched the alien fleet continue their futile search for his vanished ship. The Zephyrians had made a fatal error by clustering their entire force in such a tight formation. What had seemed like sound tactical doctrine in normal space became a deadly trap when faced with quantum displacement technology. "All hands prepare for combat," he announced over the ship's communication system. "We are about to demonstrate why it was a mistake to underestimate human ingenuity." Amy Collins fine-tuned the quantum targeting system that would guide the displacement torpedoes to their intended victims. Each warhead could be programmed to appear at a specific location in normal space with accuracy measured in centimeters rather than kilometers. "Sir, I have targeting solutions for all 16 enemy vessels," she reported. "The torpedoes will appear directly adjacent to their hulls at points calculated to cause maximum structural damage." Danny Wright continued monitoring alien communications and noted that panic was beginning to set in among the Zephyrian crews. Their advanced sensors could find no trace of the human ship, and their commanders were starting to consider the possibility that they faced technology beyond their understanding. "They are requesting reinforcements from the main fleet," he reported. "Admiral Zixthak is admitting to his superiors that the humans have capabilities their intelligence services never suspected." "Too little, too late," Jake replied as he prepared to give the order that would change the balance of power in this sector of the galaxy. "Lisa, do you have firing solutions for all targets?" "Affirmative, Captain," she responded. "All displacement torpedoes are programmed and ready for launch. We can eliminate the entire enemy fleet in a single coordinated strike." Jake looked around his bridge at the crew members who had volunteered to test humanity's most advanced military technology against an enemy that had ruled space for thousands of years. These men and women represented the best of human courage and determination combined with scientific achievement that pushed the boundaries of what was possible. The moment had come to show the galaxy that humanity would not be intimidated by ancient empires or superior numbers. Earth's children had learned to bend reality itself to their will, and they were about to demonstrate the consequences of mocking human engineering. "Fire all tubes," Jake commanded with quiet authority. "Let them discover what happens when they underestimate the species that split the eye." "Adam." 16 displacement torpedoes vanished from their launch tubes and reappeared instantly in normal space, directly beside the hulls of the Zephyrian warships. There was no time for warning, no opportunity for evasive action, and no defense against weapons that bypassed the normal laws of physics. The explosions bloomed simultaneously across the alien formation, like deadly flowers opening their petals to embrace the void. The 16 nuclear explosions occurred simultaneously, in a display of destruction that turned the Kepler 442 system into a temporary star. Each 50-megaton warhead detonated directly against the hull of a Zephyrian warship, bypassing their shields and defensive systems completely. The elegant alien vessels that had danced through space with such grace were instantly transformed into expanding clouds of superheated plasma and twisted metal. Captain Jake Morrison watched the tactical display from within quantum space as 14 of the 16 enemy ships simply ceased to exist. The displacement torpedoes had worked exactly as designed, appearing beside their targets without warning and delivering nuclear fire directly against unprotected hulls. 3 years of human research and engineering had been vindicated in 30 seconds of perfect destruction. "Direct hits on all targets, Captain," reported Commander Lisa Hayes with fierce satisfaction. 14 vessels completely destroyed. 2 ships survived with critical damage, but they are no longer combat effective. The surviving Zephyrian vessels were the flagship Stellar Wind and a heavy cruiser that had been positioned at the outer edge of the formation. Both ships had been caught in the blast waves from nearby explosions, and their hulls showed massive structural damage. Emergency signals flooded the communication frequencies as alien crews fought to save their dying vessels. Chief Petty Officer Amy Collins monitored the quantum displacement systems as Captain Morrison prepared to return his ship to normal space. The field generators had performed flawlessly during their first combat test, and the exotic matter reserves remained sufficient for several more dimensional shifts if needed. "Sir, the quantum field is stable and ready for return displacement," she reported. "We can emerge at any point within 50,000 kilometers of our original position." Jake studied the positions of the two surviving enemy ships and selected emergence coordinates that would place the Thunderbolt directly between them. The aliens needed to understand that their survival depended entirely on human mercy, rather than their own military capabilities. "Execute return displacement," he commanded. "Put us right in the middle of what remains of their formation." Reality twisted again, as the human warship slipped back into normal space, appearing exactly where its captain had intended. The Thunderbolt materialized in a cloud of exotic particles and quantum distortions that made space itself seem to ripple like water around its hull. Lieutenant Steve Parker checked his engineering displays and confirmed that all systems had survived the dimensional transition without damage. "Captain, we are back in normal space with all quantum systems operating perfectly. The field generators are ready for immediate reactivation if needed." The two surviving Zephyrian ships found themselves facing the human vessel that had just demonstrated technology beyond their comprehension. Their elegant formation had been replaced by a debris field of twisted metal and cooling plasma, while their proud fleet had been reduced to two crippled survivors. Communications Officer Danny Wright received multiple transmission attempts from the alien vessels, as their commanders tried to understand what had happened to their supposedly invincible fleet. The arrogance and mockery that had filled their communications just minutes earlier had been replaced by shock and desperate confusion. "Sir, both surviving ships are attempting to contact us," he reported. "They are requesting medical assistance for their wounded and asking for clarification of our technological capabilities." Jake activated the main communication system and prepared to deliver a message that would reshape how the galaxy viewed humanity. The time for hiding human capabilities behind primitive appearances had ended, and it was important to establish the new balance of power clearly. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the United Earthship Thunderbolt," he broadcast on all frequencies. "To the surviving vessels of the Zephyrian fleet, you attacked human territory and mocked our military capabilities. Your education in human warfare is now complete." Admiral Zixthak responded from his damaged flagship, with a voice that shook with shock and barely controlled fear. The alien commander who had been so confident just minutes earlier now sounded like someone who had seen his entire understanding of the universe collapse around him. "Human Captain, we do not understand your technology," he transmitted. "Our sensors detected no weapons launch, yet our ships were destroyed by nuclear explosions that appeared from nowhere. How is such a thing possible?" Jake smiled grimly as he considered how much information to reveal about quantum displacement technology. The aliens needed to understand that humanity possessed capabilities they could not counter, but revealing too many details might allow them to develop countermeasures. "Let us say that human science has progressed further than your intelligence services realized," he replied diplomatically. "Your ships were destroyed by weapons that operate according to principles your species has not yet discovered." Amy Collins reported that both surviving alien vessels were broadcasting distress signals to the main Zephyrian fleet, requesting immediate reinforcements and medical assistance. The survivors were also transmitting detailed reports about the battle that would soon reach every corner of the galaxy. "Sir, they are warning their empire that humans possess devastating new military technology," she observed. "Word of this engagement will spread quickly through their communication networks." "Good," Jake replied with satisfaction. "The galaxy needs to understand that Earth and her colonies are under human protection. Any future aggression will be met with the same response we demonstrated today." Lisa Hayes monitored the tactical situation as the two damaged Zephyrian ships struggled to maintain basic life support systems. Their proud hulls had been torn open by nuclear fire, and their crews were fighting desperately to prevent complete structural collapse. "Captain, both enemy vessels are requesting permission to withdraw from the system," she reported. "They claim they are no longer capable of combat operations and wish to evacuate their wounded." Jake considered the strategic implications of allowing the survivors to escape versus destroying them completely. Living witnesses would spread word of human capabilities more effectively than debris fields, and the aliens had learned the lesson he intended to teach. Grant them safe passage, he decided, but make sure they understand that any return to this system will be considered an act of war. Danny Wright transmitted the message to both alien ships and received acknowledgments that were filled with gratitude and lingering fear. The Zephyrian commanders who had arrived with such confidence were now fleeing with their tails between their legs. Steve Parker called out from engineering, where he was monitoring the quantum displacement systems that had proven so effective in their first combat test. Captain, all our special equipment performed exactly as designed. We could repeat this engagement against a much larger force if necessary. Jake nodded with pride as he considered what his crew had accomplished. They had taken untested experimental technology into battle against an enemy that possessed thousands of years of military experience. The victory had been complete and decisive, proving that human ingenuity could overcome any technological disadvantage. As the surviving Zephyrian ships limped away from Kepler 442 at emergency speed, Jake knew that news of this battle would reshape how every species in the galaxy viewed humanity. The age of treating Earth as a primitive backwater had ended today in nuclear fire and quantum displacement. The stars no longer seemed quite so hostile, and humanity's expansion into space could continue under the protection of weapons that made ancient empires tremble with fear.